Hey, this is Walt from StogieReview.com here for another cigar video, and this time around I want to do something similar to the video I did last week. Last week, if you remember, I did a little video on different types of lighters, and I did a whole write-up on the pros and cons to certain lighters. This week I want to do something similar, although it's not going to have as much write-up. It's going to be more like here's my findings, I want to discuss it a little bit and get your opinion. And along those lines, I want to keep this video relatively short. As I mentioned in the other video, I want them to stay under 15 minutes. So that's my goal here. And now the topic for this video is Maduro cigars. And as I said, it's meant more for a back and forth discussion more so than an informative article. Now, if you're not familiar with Maduro cigars, Maduro means ripe. It's Spanish for ripe, or fully developed. Now, typically, Maduro cigars are the ones that are much darker in color. Sometimes you can see them as almost black. There's also double Maduros and Oscuros. Double Maduro meaning, or also called Maduro, meaning even darker than your typical Maduro. Now, Maduro cigars go through, or Maduro leaf goes through more of a fermentation process. It spends more time fermenting. The sugars that are in the leaf come out, and it generally makes for a sweeter cigar. Now, the common misconception with Maduro cigars is that the darker the leaf, the stronger the cigar. Now, I've got a really good friend of mine who used to constantly tell me all the time, I want to go to the cigar shop and I want to buy the darkest, strongest cigar they have. And automatically, in the back of his mind, he would think, just because the cigar is really dark means it's going to be really strong. Now, I did a write-up some time ago, and I think it was on the old Club Stogie forums, where I posed it as a cigar misconception. And I'm not sure whether I actually wrote up an article for Stogie Review or not, but I posed it as this. You wake up first thing in the morning, you have a cup of coffee, you sit down on a beautiful, sunny, cool day, first cigar of the day, you sit down with the newspaper and you've got two cigars in front of you. You've got a Helix Maduro and you've got a Opus X. Helix Maduro is darker than the Opus X. Which one are you going to choose? If you know anything about the cigars you've got in front of you, you're going to select the Helix Maduro because it's much milder. Unless, of course, you want that powerhouse in the morning, where you would go with the Opus X. That's just one example of two cigars where one is dramatically more powerful than the other, although it is much lighter than the other. So there's just this misconception that darker is stronger. And I think that a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot of the manufacturers, some of the manufacturers really play on that misconception. And they really drive it home with their packaging and how dark their cigars are. Now, I have a couple of cigars here that I just kind of wanted to show you and give you a little information on. Now, one of the cigars I wanted to show you, which I don't have, is the Pinar del Rio Oscuro. It's made by Abe Flores of Pinar del Rio Cigars. It is, for an Oscuro, it's surprisingly light colored. It's more brown than black. It has a little bit of splotchy dark spots which seem to be naturally occurring throughout the fermentation process. It gets sort of a mottled, almost uneven look at times. And although it is an Oscuro wrapper, it's spent more time than other cigars fermenting, it's not as dark as you would think. Now, Abe, who I've talked to at length at different times, has gone into the fact that he tries to roll his cigars in such a way where he stretches the leaf and tries to force the oil to the surface to make his cigars look oily. He does not steam his cigars, he does not dye his cigars, and that's why his cigars are far lighter than a lot of the other cigars out there. Now, not everyone with a dark cigar steams their cigars or dyes them, but it's one of the, I don't want to call it an underhanded method, but personally I really dislike dyed cigars, and there are a lot of manufacturers that feel the same way. Now, another cigar that I have for you, which really isn't a fair comparison because it's a different type of leaf. This is an El Primer Mundo Rosado Oscuro. Now, this is obviously a Rosado wrapper, and therefore it probably isn't going to ever be as dark as a Connecticut shade, but you can see just how light this wrapper is, and it's designated Oscuro. just by looking at the cigar, I would simply assume that this is another manufacturer that dislikes the thought of steaming or dyeing their wrappers in order to make their cigars appear darker and potentially much stronger than they really are. Now, some cigars that are dyed are really strong, but they're dyed or they're steamed or whatever the case may be simply to make them appear manly and full-bodied and a powerhouse. And I don't know, I really dislike that process, although I don't know what is steamed and what isn't steamed. I think that steaming is a little more acceptable than dyeing. Another cigar that is Maduro, which again probably isn't the greatest comparison because it's not a Connecticut broadleaf. Actually, you know what? Actually, I'm pretty sure this one is. It's an Oliva Serie V Maduro. Again, you've got a cigar that's not black, it's fairly dark, but if you put this side by side with the Habano, the Ligero Especial, you'll see that there's a color difference. This one is darker, but it's not drastically different. It's not pitch black as where the other one is light in color. They're fairly close. So another Maduro that's not quite as dark as some of the others. Now the other two that I want to show you, actually, I want to show you those two after I light my cigar, because I've been sitting here with a cigar that's clipped. This is an El Cobre by Oliva, by the way. And I've been meaning to light it, but I've been talking with my hands a little too much and grabbing at cigars and pulling from cellophane to show you and whatnot. So I'm going to light this cigar. I'm going to come back in just a second, and I want to show you two really dark cigars, which I think potentially are dyed. So sit tight, I'll be right back. Alright, well, got my cigar lit, and now it's time to go into some other cigars. Actually, two other cigars. Now, these cigars are two that are really dark in comparison to a lot of other cigars. And, you know, I thought, well, you know, they're really dark. Let's see what happens when we wipe them down a little bit. So what I have here is it's a Padilla Obsidian. It's an Edición Especial 2006. These are cigars that are national exclusive. They've been out for a while now, and they're made by Ernesto Padilla. These aren't made in the new factory down in Miami, but these cigars are notorious for being really dark, flavorful cigars, and fairly cheap or inexpensive. They are what I believe Ernesto considers to be a value line. And these cigars are fairly dark in color, and I remember smoking one of these one time and my fingers were a little brown. Now, that's not something that ultimately means the cigar was dyed, because from what I understand, even some steaming can cause some color to wipe off. I don't know whether it sort of brings some color to the surface and it makes it potentially easy to wipe off, or what the case may be. But I'm curious, and these are fairly inexpensive. So what I have is just a clean paper towel, folded up, and some water. And basically all I'm going to do is just add a little water to the paper towel. I don't want it to get sopping wet. And I'm just going to wipe off the cigar and see what happens. And we've got brown. So I don't know whether that is dye or if that's just naturally coming off from the leaf. Now, because of, you know, it's not totally dark, I wouldn't assume that this is dye. And from what I understand, the dye can be a variety of things. Can be molasses, can be some sort of mixture of molasses and something else. Just anything to darken the cigar. So in this case, we have a little bit of color transfer. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I should probably grab a natural wrap cigar and do the same thing and see what happens. I probably have one that's fairly inexpensive. I'll set that aside, let it dry, and then I'll pack it back up and hope it doesn't explode. And next cigar is one that I am positive, or at least I think I am positive, is dyed. It is one that I got during the famous Cigar Expo. It was given to anyone that checked into the area hotels. It was by Rocky Patel. This is an Edge. Now, the first time I handled this cigar after I got it, it felt weird, almost like mildly sticky, and it still feels kind of weird. You know, it doesn't feel natural. I get the impression that something is on here. You know, when you sort of pinch it and pull your fingers back, it just doesn't feel right, if that makes any sense at all. And again, brand new, clean paper towel. I'm gonna add a little bit of water to it and see what happens. Now, I've done this before with the cigar. Actually, it was just smoking the cigar. I had stuff all over my lips from the cigar, so I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. But we're going to go through this process again and just see what happens. Don't want to damage the leaf. But as you can see, I got a whole lot of stuff coming off the cigar. And this is the same experience I had before with the cigar, where I would start to smoke it, I would feel almost like a sticky sensation on the lips. And I'd, you know, wipe off my lips, and sure enough, my knuckle was brown. And then I would just roll the cigar against my lip, make sure that it was wet, and then I'd wipe my thumb across it, and I'd get the same thing. I'd get this brown coloring all over my fingers. And you know, that really irritated me quite a bit when I had that happen, because it was a cigar that I didn't think was dyed. Actually, I don't smoke very many Rocky Patel products, especially the Edge. I don't particularly care for them. But I lit up this cigar, and I figured, I've got it. It was free. I might as well smoke it, you know, to end the night. And you know, that was the result. So you know what, I got the cigar lit, and as I said, it is the Oliva, or it is the Alcobre made by Oliva. It's not a Maduro. It's fairly dark in color, and I don't have another paper towel, so what I'm going to do is use the bottom side of the one that I'm going to use the bottom side of the other, the one that I wiped down the Padilla Obsidian with, and see what happens. Watch this. I'm going to destroy the cigar, but since I'm not going to allow it to dry, I've got like virtually no color. You know, there's a little bit, which isn't totally surprising, but it's not quite as dark as that. But then again, we're talking Maduro versus natural, so maybe the Padilla Obsidian isn't dyed. Maybe it is just some natural coloring wiping off the leaf. But I don't know about the Edge Maduro. That's a lot of color wiping off. So there is just a little tidbit on, you know, potentially dyed cigars and things like that. And while this was going on, actually before I turned the camera off, I just punched in a real quick Twitter poll. Not actually doing a poll on Twitter, just threw out a random question pertaining to these Maduros, and asked, and I quote, I have to find it again. Alright, do you feel that the act of dyeing cigars is in any way, quote-unquote, underhanded or meant to trick consumers? Now, some answers came rolling in. Mike, who is a regular on the forums, goes on to say, yes, there's no reason to change the natural color unless you are trying to hide something. Another answer goes on to say that I think it's a nasty habit and don't like it one bit. The only thing that should dye my lips is Kool-Aid. Further on down, yes, who does such things? Yes, further on, I think it is meant to deceive. And even further down, we have, I see it as a way to use inferior tobacco and make sorting easier. I don't like that they turn my fingers colors. And we've got another that says, if it tastes good, I could care less. Further on down, absolutely dyeing cigars is lying to your customers. Supposed to be an all-natural product. You know, I want leaves and a pretty band, nothing more. And you know, I've got a couple of more that go on. And the general consensus is that people typically don't like these dyed cigars. And personally, I don't like it either. I like to think that I have an all-natural product that doesn't go through, not to say shady operations, but I don't like to think that someone is painting my cigars so that they appear to be wicked and you know, that manly man, dark, strong powerhouse of a cigar. And I like to think that it's just a natural product that is utilized in such a way that, you know, if it's dark, it's because it was fermented for a longer period of time, not because it was potentially dyed. Now again, I'm not saying that these two cigars that I wiped down weren't dyed. One I strongly think is dyed. I could possibly be wrong, but I really do think it is dyed. And without the manufacturer actually saying, yes, I dye my cigars, there's really no way to tell. Unless, of course, you knew what dyeing cigars was all about, and you could do that. Actually, where I wiped down is a little lighter, and not by a whole lot, but you can definitely see it. It's still a little wet also. But there you have it. That is my little rant on Maduro cigars. And again, this is meant more as a back and forth discussion. You know, if you ever stumbled upon a dyed cigar and were unhappy about it, what do you think about dyed cigars? Do you care? Don't you care? Are there any that you feel are potentially dyed? Any ones that you're sure are dyed? You know, just things of that nature. So I'm over my time, so that's about all I have for you. So until next time, happy smoking, and drop a comment. Catch you later.